The Senate will come to order. Please rise for the invocation to be delivered by Brian Treadaway of Vertical Church, Ovilla.
Would you pray with me? O God, it is with great humility that I stand before you today. You are the maker of the heavens and the earth, the one who holds all things by your mighty power, and the one who has shown us the way of life in your Son, Jesus. It is in that name that I pray for these great men and women today. I pray for wisdom. Like Solomon, may they be filled with insight, understanding, and clarity for leading. I pray for courage. Like Moses, may they have the boldness to stand for truth regardless of the cost. I pray for protection. Guard these halls with your mighty hand. Watch over their families. Keep them by your strength. For this day, this time, you have assembled them for a mighty task. I ask you to bless them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Treadway. Mr. Doorkeeper.
Mr. President, there's a message from the House.
Admit the messenger.
Mr. President, I'm directed by the House to inform the Senate that the House has taken the following action. The House has passed the following measures. HB 178 by Murr.
The following message from the governor. Secretary will read the message.
To the Senate of the 88th Legislature regular session, I ask the advice, consent, and confirmation of the Senate with respect to the following appointment: to be a member of the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas Oversight Committee, Dr. David A. Cummings, San Angelo. Respectfully submitted, Greg Abbott, Governor of Texas, to nominations.
That's who we're doing a bill.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Committee Substitute Senate Bill 409.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Senate Bill 409 relates to the rights of victims, guardians of victims, and close relatives of deceased victims in the criminal justice system. Oftentimes, a sexual assault survivor is not informed about the status of their case in a timely manner. Not consulted when the case was dismissed or pled to a lower offense. This re-traumatizes the victims and leads to less engagement from victims as a whole. While the Texas Constitution states that a crime victim has the right to confer with a representative of the prosecutor's office and to receive information about the conviction, sentence, imprisonment, and release of the accused, many sexual assault victims do not receive this support from prosecuting attorneys, or if they receive, it is typically after the fact. Senate Bill 409 seeks to strengthen these constitutional rights by adding language to the Code of Criminal Procedure, clearly stating that a victim, guardian of a victim, or close relative of a deceased victim has a right to be informed about and confer with a prosecuting attorney about the deposition of the case. With that, Mr. President, members, I will move suspension of regular order of business.
Senator Hinojosa moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 409. Is there an objection? The chair hears none. The rules are suspended. Chair now lays out on second reading Senate Bill 409. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 409 relating to the rights of victims, guardians of victims, and close relatives of deceased victims in the criminal justice system.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion.
I'm going to pass it to engrossment.
Senator Hinojosa moves passage to engrossment. Is there an objection? The chair hears none. The bill's passed to engrossment. Senator Hinojosa, you're now recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Hinojosa moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Committee Substitute Senate Bill 409. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 409 relating to the rights of victims, guardians of victims, and close relatives of deceased victims in the criminal justice system.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion.
I'm going to follow passage of Committee Substitute Senate Bill 409.
Senator Hinojosa moves final passage on Committee Substitute Senate Bill 409. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, Senate Bill 409 is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Chair lays out the following resolution. The Secretary will read the resolution. Members, if we could have your attention, please.
Senate Resolution 414 by Flores. Whereas legendary country music singer and songwriter Tanya Tucker is visiting the state capitol on April 13, 2023, providing a welcome opportunity to pay tribute to her many achievements. And whereas a native of Seminole, Tanya Tucker began showcasing her vocal talents from a young age, and after signing to Columbia Records, she scored her first hit in 1972 with Delta Dawn at the age of 13. That year, she made her debut at the Grand Ole Opry and was named the new female vocalist of the year by the Academy of Country Music. Her second album spawned 2 #1 songs, What's Your Mama's Name and Blood Red and Going Down, and established her as a major star. Her run of country hits included Lizzie and the Rain Man, San Antonio Stroll, and Don't Believe My Heart Can Stand Another You in 1975. And she followed that up with albums Lovin' and Learnin' and Here's Some Love in 1976 and Riding Rainbows in 1977. And whereas Miss Tucker moved to Los Angeles in 1978 and ventured into new territory with TNT, an album that achieved gold certification and earned her a Grammy nomination for Best Rock Vocal Performance. In the subsequent years, she appeared on several television shows and made her feature film debut in Hard Country. Over the course of her career, she has earned additional credits on the Rebels miniseries, Love Boat, and Touched by an Angel, in addition to appearing on American Idol and countless other programs. And whereas beginning with Girls Like Me in 1986, Miss Tucker enjoyed one of the most successful stretches of her career, racking up 4 top 10 country singles on that album and 8 top 10 singles in a row between 1988 and 1989. She was selected as the Female Vocalist of the Year in 1991 by the Country Music Association, and in 1994, she performed at the halftime Super Bowl 28 with Clint Black, Travis Tritt, and Winona Judd. In 1997, she returned to the top 10 with the hit Little Things and was inducted in the Texas Country Music Hall of Fame. And whereas since 2000, Miss Tucker has established her own label, Tucker Time Records, authored a book, 100 Ways to Beat the Blues on Fireside, and continued to perform and release new albums. She received her first 2 Grammy Awards in 2020 for While I'm Livin' and Bring My Flowers Now. And the Country Music Hall of Fame announced that she would be inducted as a member of the class of 2023. And whereas with her iconic voice and spirited live performances, Tanya Tucker has won the enduring affection of generations of country music fans, and her outstanding accomplishments are a source of tremendous pride to her fellow Texans. Now therefore be it resolved that the Senate of the 88th Texas Legislature hereby honor Tanya Tucker for her contributions to music and extend to her sincere best wishes for continued success. And be it further resolved that an official copy of this resolution be prepared for Ms. Tucker as an expression of high regard by the Texas Senate.
You know, Senator Flores, in another life, I was a country western disc jockey. I used to play a lot of your music. Senator Flores on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, it's a great honor to welcome a true Texas legend, Ms. Tanya Tucker, to the Texas Senate. Ms. Tucker is originally from Seminole, Texas, in Senator Sparks' district. I now have the incredible privilege to say she's a constituent of mine here in Central Texas, where we ranch in Burnett County. I'm sure that each of us members has a specific song or a few that came to mind when we hear the name Tanya Tucker. Ms. Tucker, Delta Dawn, yes, ma'am. Ms. Tucker, you truly are a household name here in Texas. Your musical talents are incomparable, and few have had as successful a career as you have. After beginning your musical success at the young age of 13, you've become one of the most successful female vocalists in country music, and have left a legacy that will long continue for many generations to come. You are an inspiration to so many young artists around the country, and it is my most sincere honor to welcome you here to the Texas Senate today and congratulate you on being named to the Country Music Hall of Fame class of 2023. Senator Sparks?
Senator Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, as state senator for District 31, and growing up in Midland, Texas, which encompasses Seminole, growing up in Midland, Texas, big fan of yours. My whole childhood, listening to country music, and of course you were on radio all the time. And so thank you for being here today. Thank you for what you mean to country music. And, thank you for not forgetting about us here in Texas.
Mr. President, I move past the Senate Resolution 414.
Yeah. So Tanya, 1972, right? Delta Dawn? So I was working my way through colleges at Country Western Disc Jockey outside of Baltimore and playing that song. Yeah, there we go. Remember, Senator Perry, did you wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Quick, I was 10 years old and watching Hee Haw on Saturday nights with my grandparents, listening to 45s with you on that. I still have those. So good days, good times, and just a really good Texas icon. Thank you for being here. And I used to be the senator over Seminole, so I can claim you too. So it's good.
Anyway, we're proud of you. We're proud of you. We're just glad to have you as one of us. Members, all rise in honor of Tanya Tucker. Resolution is adopted. Senator Paxton. Chair lays out the following resolution. Secretary, read the resolution. Senator Lamantia, this is yours.
Senate Resolution 406 by Lamantia commending Helen Ramirez on her appointment as City Manager of Brownsville.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, it's an honor to recognize Helen Ramirez on her recent appointment as the City Manager of Brownsville. She was appointed to manage the largest city in the Rio Grande Valley, and we are confident that she will provide Brownsville with exceptional leadership in the years to come. As City Manager, Ms. Ramirez is committed to stimulating economic growth and accelerating the redevelopment of downtown Brownsville. Her contributions to the community are already evident, and we are excited to see what she will achieve in the future. Your dedication to the community is inspiring, and we wish you all the best in your new role. Members, please join me in welcoming the City Manager of Brownsville, Helen Ramirez.
Any objection to the resolution? Hearing none, the resolution is adopted. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for being with us. The following resolution, the Secretary read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 407 by Lamantia commending Mayor Trey Mendez on his exceptional service to the people of Brownsville.
Mayor, good to have you with us. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, it is my pleasure to recognize Brownsville Mayor Trey Mendez here at the Texas State Capitol. Mayor Mendez has been serving the city of Brownsville since June of 2019, and in the past 4 years, he has been working tirelessly to lead the city towards new opportunities and greater inclusion. Mayor Mendez has the distinction of being the second youngest mayor in Brownsville's history, but he has proven himself to be a forward-thinking public servant who is committed to serving the people he cares about. As mayor, he has focused on higher education, expanding connectivity, and economic development. We are thrilled to have you here with us on this special day, and we thank you for your commitment to the people of Brownsville. Members, please join me in welcoming Mayor Mendez to the State Capitol.
Thank you, Mayor. Any objection to the resolution? Hearing none, the resolution is adopted. Senator Paxton, you're recognized on committee substitute for Senate Bill 13. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to Senate Bill 13. The committee substitute to Senate Bill 13 provides increased structure and transparency to the processes and standards for school library book acquisition and review policies to ensure that school library collections are appropriate for their campuses based on state standards relating to grade, age, developmental appropriateness, and community values. It affirms that a parent has a right to know what their child checks out from the school library. And I would like to thank the Lieutenant Governor for prioritizing this bill to ensure that our school libraries are safe for young eyes. I move to suspend.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
18 ayes, 12 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 13. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 13 relating to a school district's library materials and catalog, the creation of local school library advisory councils, and parental rights regarding public school library catalogs.
You're recognized on passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
The Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
18 ayes, 12 nays. We will hold there.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator.
President. Thank you, members.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 930.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider committee substitute for Senate Bill 930.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
26 ayes, 4 nays. The rules were suspended. Chair lays out in second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 930. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 930 relating to the publication of opinions by a court.
There is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Middleton.
Senator Middleton, hold on one moment so everyone gets the amendment. You're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I was waiting to explain the bill and the committee substitute with the amendment here. So all this amendment does is it's a technical correction to say that the author or authors of an opinion are public information. The original bill said authors, plural, so it could be singular, and this is just technical correction to that. And this bill is very simple. It's about transparency. It treats our court decisions as public information where the authorship is disclosable to the public. And Senate Bill 930 will ensure that voters will have a well-rounded understanding of their appellate judiciary and their judicial philosophy as they cast their ballots. And as we know, Texas judges, like our fellow members of this body, are elected by the very same voters. And we need to make sure that those voters have a say in who is serving them on the bench. And this bill provides more transparency for voters to know the full record of the authors of our judicial appellate opinions.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You're recognized. Passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move passage to engrossment for committee substitute Senate Bill 930.
Secretary will call the roll when ready. There being
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
Sorry about that, Madam Secretary. There being 25 ayes, 5 nays, the bill passes on engrossment. Now you're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
25 ayes, 5 nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 930. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 930 relating to the publication of opinions by a court.
You're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move final passage for committee substitute Senate Bill 930.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
25 ayes, 5 nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you. Senator Springer, recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to reconsider the vote to engrossment that Senate Bill 13 was passed.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. The following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Springer.
Senator Springer, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Paxton, on working with me on this amendment. This amendment has it where school districts may not add donated books to the library without going through the same process where the Board of Trustees and the district have to approve it. And I believe it's acceptable to the author.
Is he speaking for you?
He speaks the truth. It is acceptable to the author.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Now you get to motion to go to engrossment a second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
18 ayes, 12 nays. The bill passed to engrossment. Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized as committee substitute for Senate Bill 1222. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time the committee substitute for Senate Bill 1222 relating to the regulation of appraisers and the duties of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board. Members, this bill would make the appraisal industry more accessible for new applicants while also introducing a new level of regulatory transparency and efficiency throughout the relevant entities. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Any objection to a Senator Zaffarini bill? Of course not. That would be record-shattering, Senator Nichols, if anyone objected. That would be like historic.
It would be very rude.
Yeah, it would be rude. Yes. Forget the politics, it's just rude. The rules are suspended. Chair now lays down second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1222.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1222 relating to regulation of appraisers and the duties of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board.
You're recognized on passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passed to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
30 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1222. Secretary will call the roll. I'm sorry. Read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1222 relating to regulation of appraisers and the duties of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board.
Now you're recognized on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Now the Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
30 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. How many is that now?
At least 12.
Yeah. No, you were at 15 last week.
At least 15.
You were at 15 on Monday, and the House total was at 7. I just want you to know that wasn't on April 3rd. You were at 15 bills passed, and the House was at 7. They've caught up since, catching up, but
I'll go talk to them.
I don't think that's ever happened before.
Thank you, Mr. President
Yes.
and members.
Senator Betancourt? You're recognized on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1039. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Irregularities happen in every election cycle in Texas. Harris County suffered a large number of irregularities of voting in their elections since 2020. Currently, there is no mechanism to require an elections official to explain an irregularity to those that are involved in an election. And I'm talking about candidates, election workers, party chairs, proponents or opponents of a ballot measure. There's, at this point in time, they simply don't have to respond to inquiries. And what this bill does is set up a civil process to ask questions and get answers. And specifically, it would answer a question and allow the election officials to respond within 20 days. If they don't, they respond given another 10 days on a second request. And then at that point in time, it's turned over to the Secretary of State. They can order an audit and in extreme circumstances, end up with a conservator as a result. In Harris County, some of the few problems of the 2022 election are 10,000 primary ballots not counted by the previous election administrator, but sworn to in a statement that before a judge on Thursday, and then revealed to the public at 10:30 at night after the nightly newscast on Saturday. That resulted in a firestorm of criticism at Commissioner's Court that cost that election administrator her job. We've seen other problems that are almost too numerous to count, but we'll talk briefly about the election administrator not supplying enough ballot paper to 120 polls. And it's not just one specific news outlet that's done a study of it. I just talked to another, and they're going to release their results. So there's approximately 120 polls that were undersupplied with ballot paper on November the 8th, with at least several dozen running out of paper, and that caused the suppression of thousands of votes. We have to go back to a point where election judges can get through to talk to election administrators on the phone. In my day as tax assessor, I used to handle 55,000 calls from the public in presidential elections and answer those within 4 seconds. The committee substitute for 1039 would allow election workers, candidates, party officials, proponents, and opponents of a measure to ask election officials questions regarding the election, and per the time frame we've discussed. And the committee substitute would provide means of audit elections based on targeted issues, bringing additional transparency and confidence to the election process in Texas, which is sorely needed. Mr. President, members, move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider a committee substitute for Senate Bill 1039.
Senator West, what purpose?
Question of the author.
Do you yield?
Certainly.
Senator Bettencourt, as it relates to the request, you said the bill says within 20 days?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, and help me to understand the rationale for 20 days.
The rationale is that it's nearly 3 weeks, okay, that the election administrator has time to respond to request, and that 20-day period just sets an endpoint to where if a request comes in, that the election officials respond.
Okay, and how did you come up with 20 days as opposed to some other time frame?
Well, I looked
looked
at, from my experience of being an elections administrator, that it shouldn't take, not election administrator, as voter registrar, it shouldn't take any longer than a couple weeks to be able to respond to an inquiry. And I thought that it would be best to keep the whole process of 20 and 10 days roughly within a month.
And so, in this instance, if any election worker and I have not read the bill. That's why I want to stop a little bit, because things are starting to move pretty quickly. Who would be entitled to ask the questions and receive a response within this time period?
Great question, Senator West. Section F, page 2, line 13.
I'm sorry,
Section F, page 2, line 13. A person may make a request under this section if the person participated in the irrelevant election as a candidate, a county chair or state chair of a political party, a presiding judge, an alternate presiding judge, or the head of a specific purpose political committee that supports or opposes a ballot measure. 5 really good categories of people that are within the system, that understand the election, and would have certainly standing under any opinion, at least in my book, to be able to ask a question of election administrator.
And the election administrator, is this before the election takes place, after the election, or when?
Well, actually, this is 20 days really from the request. So it's just really a date of the request from chapter subsection A. And a person described by the subsection issues a written request to the county clerk, other authority conducting an election for an explanation and supporting documentation for.
Does it give you any concern that if the administrator's in the middle of an election and preparing for the election, that person may very well be tied up with different issues associated with the election and not be able to answer or respond in a timely manner? I mean,
no,
based on your experiences.
No, because, for example, the voter registration deadline is 30 days prior to the election.
Right.
A question you could see that would come in, to a clerk or election administrator could easily be handled within that 20-day time frame. Again, they also have a secondary 10-day time frame to fall back on as well.
Hold your microphone up.
Oh, sorry. So it's they have as a voter registrar, the cutoff is 30 days before the election. For a county clerk or elections administrator, they would have 20 days to respond from this. Then they also have a fallback of another 10 days if the request is repeated.
And the fact is that anyone from that office would be able to respond, correct?
Absolutely.
On behalf of the election administrator.
Sure, no question about it.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
18 ayes, 12 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair leaves out in second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1039. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1039, relating to processes to address election irregularities.
There is an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Gutierrez.
Senator Gutierrez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I want to apologize to the chairman because I always try to talk to people beforehand, and you sent me a nice text this morning. Thank you for trying to tell me to get better because I've been feeling a little under the weather. Not COVID, tested twice, so we're good. Just a little spring fever.
Senator Swardner has x-ray vision. He's looking at other issues. That's right.
That's scary. At the end of the day, I just want to, I didn't reach out back to you on this, but I know you saw the amendments because you did mention something about the text. And I really just want to add a little bit of a layer of due process here so that we get out of the politics of things. Someday, might be a different Secretary of State appointed by a different governor who might be a Democrat in many, many years from now.
It's happened before and will happen again someday.
Happened before. It's happened again. And so by way of taking the politics out of this thing, what this amendment does is it allows when the county clerk or the authority conducting an election, they may challenge a determination under this new section by the Secretary of State that a violation of this code has occurred in the district court, not later than 30 days after receiving the notice from the Secretary of State. And the reason I put this in there is because typically the state always takes a position that a county cannot sue a state, and because we're the same entity. And so this obviates that position. It allows for a waiver of that process. It allows for some due process in the place, and it takes the whole the gotcha politics out of this mess. And it puts us in a position where a district court judge can see the evidence very quickly and figure out what's what. And so that's all I'm trying to do here, not anything other than due process, so that counties can have some protection back. That's all. And with that, I move adoption of my amendment.
Senator Eckhart, what purpose?
To ask questions of the author of the amendment.
Do you yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
Senator Gutierrez, I like the idea of this amendment. This is a right of appeal for the county clerk or other authority. So in many of these counties, the county clerk is a separately elected official and can pursue his or her legal claims independently of the commissioner's court. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am. That is true.
Similarly, other authority might include the tax assessor collector, would it not?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, an independently elected official who could pursue legal claims independent of the Commissioner's Court.
Yes, Senator, that's correct.
Now, if the elections administrator, if the county chooses to have an elections administrator, that elections administrator could not pursue this appeal without Commissioner's Court approval, I would think, correct? Because they are an agent of the Commissioner's Court.
That is correct, Senator.
So, I do note in the fiscal note of the bill, it says the fiscal implications of this bill cannot be determined because the number of county offices administering elections or voter registration that would be placed under administrative oversight or conservatorship cannot be estimated. The number of elected and possibly appointed officials involved in elections, we would certainly want them to have a right, since the county is paying for these elections, to push back on a determination by the Secretary of State. Otherwise, the Secretary of State can just claim conservatorship without any right of appeal, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. That is correct.
So this would be very helpful so that all of those elected and appointed officials would have a right to be heard before the local taxpayers foot the bill for a state conservatorship that will then run their elections, correct?
I think what it does, Senator, to your point, is it provides a layer of protection to have a third party, which would be a district court judge, call the strikes, call the balls in a quick period of time to determine if there's truly a violation of the election code here by an election clerk and their staff, or if indeed this is just political. And I think that that's important for both sides. Look, there's two parties that are in the state, Democrats and Republicans. And the Secretary of State is appointed by the governor. We have a great Secretary of State, a former colleague, not suggesting that she's political or that any other prior have been political, but this is simply a due process protection for when we have a Republican that that's a little bit more overzealous, or a Democrat that's overzealous and that says that Jefferson County, they didn't, Republican, typically more Republican in their voter rolls, they might give them a hard time. And so we want impartial observers all the time, and that's the point of our election process. And so I think that this puts that layer of due process here. I don't know that there's anything wrong with it. Of course, we haven't heard from the author of the bill if this is acceptable to him, but it's about due process and impartiality. You're absolutely right. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's a good amendment. I think that an appointed statewide official should be able to be challenged by local elected officials. Even in our recent conservatorships over school districts, the elected school board has a right of appeal. I think that the same should be offered in this suggested instance of conservatorship.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, this whole notion of conservatorship under this aspect is new, and it's something that we have to, when we're doing something new, we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And by doing the right thing, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of impartiality, another eye to look at things and say, well, that really wasn't a foul ball, or that really wasn't a strike. And so that's all we're doing here, is just having a little bit more due process in place.
Thank you very much for the amendment.
Yes, ma'am. I'll move adoption.
Senator Betancourt on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, I wish we had a chance to talk about this earlier, okay, which is why I reached out.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of the bill is to set up a civil review practice that we don't rely into the courts. Because if I use HISD as an example, that costs 3 years to get a determination. When we're in a cycle that needs simple questions answered and asked, and if they're not being done and an audit shows that there's a major problem, I think it's very important that the state be able to take action to restore public confidence in the voting system, so I'm going to oppose the amendment.
I'm willing to put a time clock if you want on it to have the judge decide. And that's fine too. If you want to take 5 minutes and we can discuss the amendment, that's fine too.
Senator Betancourt, you said you oppose the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. He made an offer. You still oppose the amendment? Yes. I mean, is that a yes? Senator Betancourt, I was just asking you a question. He said, did you want to spend 2 minutes? I just want to be sure you were saying you oppose the amendment.
Mr. President, I move to oppose the amendment.
I just want to be clear. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Gardwell, Blanco.
12 yes votes, 18 no votes. The amendment fails. There's another amendment. Secretary will read the amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment 2 by Gutierrez.
You're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, members, this is the same thing. And again, I do apologize for not reaching out this morning when you texted. It's been, this little spring cold has got me a little bit. Nevertheless, the Secretary of State may not appoint a conservator. It's very simple.
Senator, can you hold your mic up a little bit?
Yes, sir. This one's very simple. The Secretary of State may not appoint a conservator under subsection F if the Secretary has declined to appoint a conservator for the same or similar violation by a county clerk or other authority conducting an election in another county. And what this is just another protection from playing politics. If the county 2 doors down the road has a similar violation and the Secretary of State does nothing about it, and yet the Secretary of State decides to say, I'm going to come over here to Harris County or Travis County or some other county or Bear, what this does, it says that they cannot play politics in that way. So it's a pretty simple amendment. I'm glad to spend some time off the microphone. I understand that might not be. I didn't think that there was much problem with the last one. It's about due process, and that's my amendment. And with that, I move adoption.
Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gutierrez, in this case, you would have to almost try to figure out some identical fact pattern to be able to use this amendment accordingly. And we're going to have to realize that finding an identical fact pattern is almost statistically impossible. So again, the purpose is to set up a civil review process where questions get answered, and that's really what the bill is designed to do. So I'm going to oppose the amendment.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco.
12 ayes, 18 nays. The amendment fails. Senator Betancourt, you recognize passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage and engrossment of the committee substitute of Senate Bill 1039.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell,
18
Blanco.
ayes, 12 no votes. You pass to engrossment, but you'll hold there.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Menendez, introduction of the Doctor of the Day.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Members, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you all of us here today and help me welcome Dr. Lloyd Van Winkle to the Texas State Capitol, in particular to his Senate chamber. I want to thank him for his acceptance to be the Doctor of the Day. I want to let you all know that he obtained his undergraduate degree at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, continued his education at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, and for the past 20 years, Dr. Van Winkle has been giving back to the community by teaching our future doctors at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. And not only does Dr. Van Winkle give back by teaching, he also sponsors children baseball, soccer, basketball teams in order to help create opportunities for many children, including his 6 children. And a medal to he and his wife, the other Dr. Van Winkle in the family. And in addition to helping the children in San Antonio, Dr. Van Winkle volunteers at the annual marathon in San Antonio, provides free care to patients in San Antonio Hospice Center, and he's very involved with the Texas Academy of Family Physicians as the chair of TAFP Political Action Committee Board of Directors. And Senators, he also practices medicine in Castroville as well as San Antonio. So really, really honored to have him. And Senator Gutierrez and I, as alums of Central Catholic, are proud to have another Central Catholic button here with us. And we know that you're a great doctor because you had a great education, a foundation for your education. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. Let's help welcome Dr. Van Winkle to his Texas Senate.
Doctor, welcome. Good to be with you. Senator Kolkhorst, you are recognized. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 26, suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and take up and consider at this time committee substitute Senate Bill 26. I first want to start by thanking the Lieutenant Governor. Mr. President, thank you for your leadership on this important issue of mental health and for allowing me to carry this important bill. I want to thank all the co-authors and the joint authors, all of the input that we've had along the way. Committee substitute Senate Bill 26 is a culmination of lots of input through the years, but I will say this too, in combination to the bill, Senator Huffman, that you're bringing to the floor on, my goodness, it'll be Monday. House Bill 1 will be heard on this floor. In coordination with that and Rider 40 in that bill, it is probably, I think, Lieutenant Governor and Mr. President, you said in our press conferences today, maybe one of the most strident plans to address the mental health needs for a state in anywhere in our nation. And so, members, I coined this as my favorite bill of the session when we laid it out in Health and Human Services, and I want to thank the committee members for all their help. Members, this is a bill. Currently, the Senate budget is allocating more than $700 million to increase community-based mental health services in inpatient capacity, along with, in Senate Bill 30, $2.321 billion in support for expanding mental health facilities in the state. Committee substitute to Senate Bill 26 complements the historic investment the Senate is making in mental health by clarifying the process for patients that are discharging from the state hospitals and transitioning back into the community. It also seeks to address these issues, especially for children and adolescents, through the creation of Innovation Grants, a program that would provide grants to a variety of providers hospitals, local mental health authorities, hospital districts, nonprofits in order to help children before the crisis. The bill also increases transparency and accountability for the Texas community-based mental health and behavioral health systems by requiring them to submit to regular performance audits once every 10 years and send monthly data on their services and outcomes to the Health and Human Services Commission so it can be made public. And finally, Committee Substitute to Senate Bill 26 directs HHSC to consider exploring funding options for nursing homes that could provide a long-term placement for some individuals with high behavioral health acuity. We call these people 365ers in our mental health hospitals that are there year-round. And there's probably a better setting that we could get them to. And so we're going to explore that in this bill as well. And so between the innovation grants, the step-down transition, the discharging plans that are assumed in the budget, and Rider 40, I think, members, that we have made a large leap forward. It began, Senator Shortner, in 2015. Senator Nichols and his desire to rebuild Rusk and the investments that we made starting then, and then moving forward. Mr. President, I know you were campaigning this last year, and you heard over and over and over again from the locally elected officials that they really need help. And so I know on Monday we'll give a layout of the money that's directed by Rider 40, but Senate Bill 26 augments that money being invested, and it is a way forward. And so, members, it is an honor to ask you to suspend the regular order of business on what I term my favorite bill of the session.
And thank you for taking on this challenge. Tremendous work and all the support on a bipartisan basis from the members. I appreciate that and appreciate the House. Dr. Bonin, working with Senator Huffman, putting in over $2 billion in the original base budget to address, which will be the biggest mental health care expansion of beds in hospitals and money in the entire country. Senator Menendez, what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one, thank, and two, ask questions of the author.
You're recognized. Do you yield, Senator?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Kolkhorst, not just for yielding, but for your hard work. You know, it makes me smile when I hear you say that this is your favorite bill of the session, because, you know, we do a lot of things here, and some we agree on, some we disagree, but this is one of those things where I feel that it holds true when people say that we're judged as a society by how we treat those who can least take care of themselves. And when it comes to mental health, this is critical. My questions are, does this help us with the lack of forensic beds? Because you know, you and I both know that there's a shortage statewide. And then two, where are we on transition and step down? Because, you know, we also work together on the foster care issues that we have in the children without placement. Sometimes they go to a mental health care facility and then they just get sent back into where they were without any kind of transition or step down facility.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 26, in combination with Rider 40, is going to address our forensic beds. And let me say this, with the Lieutenant Governor and with, you know, the House, they'd set aside $2.321 billion.
Awesome.
And when we sat down to say, okay, define the problem so we can address the problem, as I told the media earlier today, nearly 2,500 people on a wait list waiting for a state hospital bed. All but 73 are forensic beds. Nearly 1,000, right, just over 1,000 are maximum security beds, and then the rest being what we call non-MSU forensic beds. And so in combination of what we're doing in the two budget bills, SB 30 and HB 1, we're working with communities to be able to have civil beds as well as forensic beds. There will be, you know, you can't combine maximum security beds. Those are really set aside and kind of special. They can't be swing beds. Right. But I think that our plan, and it will be perfected as we continue to work with the House. I'm working with many of you. You know this, being a San Antonio senator. I know that Senator Zaffarini, Senator Campbell, back in 2015, getting that money for SASH. Senator Flores was actually in that work group and worked as well. We're just about to open up the new SASH, and I'm super excited about that. But we've identified a facility on SASH's campus that we can help with some MSU beds. And so as we look at the entire state of Texas, and how to meet those needs. One of the things that I'm most excited about is potentially setting aside $100 million to be able to let communities with what I call respite beds, they're diversion beds. You don't need a state hospital bed for that. You might need a 72-hour bed. Partnering with the state of Texas to meet the local needs. Senator Perry and Senator Sparks brought me a plan. And I want you to know that Jimmy Colcourse is really happy that that plan's no longer on our dining room table, because I took the whole thing and I spread it all out across our table. And I read it 2 weekends in a row. And it was one of the most comprehensive plans. And I'm going to tell you something. When there's a good idea, why don't you just copy it, right? And so that's kind of how I said, okay, they know that they need, Amarillo wants a state hospital. Lubbock wants to continue to build on their LMHA hospital there. But then they had all of these different respite beds and these step-down beds. And I said, well, we can't just, and I told Senator Sparks this, I said, I can't just fund West Texas. I actually have some other senators and House members that have another part of the state of Texas. But we stole that idea and we said, okay, we're going to set this money aside to drive local solutions. I want to get to the next part of so forensic beds, yes. Step-down beds, yes. Front-end beds, yes. Innovation grants for our adolescents, yes. And what we're going to do is we're not going to say that the state of Texas has all the answers, because we don't. The communities have the answers. It's different in Abilene than it is in San Antonio. It's different in Brownsville than it is in Amarillo. And so that's what we tried to craft here. The other thing, I will say this. We've had testimony in Health and Human Services and in finance of family members that say, my brother has been in the Austin State Hospital for over 2 years, 18 months. They can't release him. He can never go back into society because of certain things. We've got to find a better place for them. Plus, that is a bed that, probably we could use for someone else in a mental health crisis. And so between Senate Bill 26, Senate Bill 30, House Bill 1, it's a combination effort. But I will say this, Senator Menendez, you and I, starting way back in 2001 in the House, we started working together when I started chairing public health in 2009. I remember how many bills that you and I helped you with, you helped me with. We've been at this, and you're right. We should all be judged of how we treat the least among us. Post-pandemic, we have real issues.
Oh, absolutely.
With our adolescents. We have real issues with our adults. Yep. And so as the Lieutenant Governor said in a press conference today, this may be one of the most aggressive plans in the nation to address those issues.
Well, I want to thank you for the hard work. I want to thank you for the comprehensive answer. I just want to last question is, as we vote for this bill, it sounds to me like when we look at the comprehensive approach to mental health, that hopefully Texas will be taking not one, but several steps towards not having our county jails be where many people access mental health.
Amen.
Because that is not where we're supposed to be distributing mental health. And so I appreciate the hard work. I look forward to continuing. I think this is a journey. I think you're setting us on the right path, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you for taking my questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
You are so right, Senator Menendez. The Victoria County Sheriff told me 2 weeks ago that he has 2 inmates that have been in jail for 800 days waiting for competency. We're better than that, and we're going to solve it.
Senator Perry, for what purpose?
Just comment to the author.
Do you yield Senator Colcourse?
I do.
You recognize Senator Perry.
First, Madam Chair, and sis, ultimate respect and the hard work you put into this. You've developed a plan that, since I've been down here, it's comprehensive. It deals with the whole spectrum. We've seen those models play out. And it wasn't all my idea. It was something I saw work, and I always like to take something that's working. But you took that and put it on steroids. It's comprehensive, but yet it's still bottom up. And I think sometimes in the past we've developed these regional looks from the top down and just expected people to show up. And we really didn't talk about it at the local level. But for the first time since I've been down here, we are literally taking what's working in those areas, where the best practices are, what needs to be in addition to that, and we've created a full spectrum from point of incarceration or point of crises to where do those people need to go in the system to flow through. So I can't commend you enough for the effort and the energy, as you always do, devote to getting it right. I look forward to see the implementation of it. The good news is we're not starting from scratch. A lot of these places are already there doing some things. They just need a little help, and they need to expand. So it's a really cool thing that we're doing. And some of the other bills that you are passing out of committee we're going through are actually going to incorporate some old existing capacity that we've let set idle that are going to deal with that IDD population maybe that find themselves in the incarceration cycle, but the better, least restrictive, and one with more quality can be. So I'm excited about where we're taking this and where you've let it go and where you're willing to go to see how we make someone's lives better that arguably from day one, since they were born, had a different path than you or I. And so really, really excited about where you're going with this, and the fact that we've kind of incorporated the community. Instead of just kind of saying, do this, we've allowed them some flexibility to tailor make it for what really works. So it's brilliant and awesome the way you've approached this, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, Senator Perry. The dean often says that this is one of the most deliberative bodies in the nation. And I will tell you that it was you, Senator Perry, and Senator Sparks. You continued to hand me the West Texas plan over and over and over again. And it was really brilliant. Your local people said, this is how we can address some issues. You can't get everything you want, but we're starting things in that direction. And again, you're absolutely right. This, instead of a top-down approach, it's going to be the bottom driving some of these, being the locals driving the decisions. But I will say this, not a lot of people want maximum security unit beds, right? That's pretty much a state function, along with some of those forensic beds that we can design that can be the swing beds that can go back and forth between civil and forensic. And what Senator Menendez talked about, which is this, the county jails should not be our mental health hospitals, although we have restoration in our county jails that has been effective, and we will continue to use that.
Senator Sparks, for what purpose?
Comments to the author.
Senator Kolkhorst, do you yield?
I do.
You're recognized, Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say I too appreciate having the opportunity to work with you on this. You've done a fantastic job. Large project. But, as we talk about, nobody wants to have maximum security beds in their community. My hope and prayer is that because it is going to handle all levels of care and address all levels of care, we're going to reduce the need for those maximum security beds. We're going to reduce the need or the burden on our county jails. We're going to, we've wound up, our younger generation is experiencing more anxiety and depression than any other time in our nation's history. And I think we've got to put the tools in place to address those types of things so that long term we have a healthier culture all the way around. And I think this is a great start. And so I commend your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sparks. You're right. And you talk a lot about the front end. And that's why we have to have the state hospital beds, contracted beds, and things like that. But we're going to begin to focus more on the front end as well. Thank you.
Senator Springer, your light was on. Okay. All right. Members, the motion before us is the suspension of the regular order of business on Committee Substitute 26. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Committee Substitute Senate Bill 26. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 26 relating to local mental health authority and local behavioral health authority audits and mental and behavioral health reporting services and programs.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 1 by Gutierrez.
Senator Gutierrez, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to refer to you as one thing, and I mean this from the heart. Lois, you called me on day 2 when Uvalde happened. You were one of a few people that called me, so I hope you don't mind me calling you by your first name because you and I go way back. And I'm not going to go into the conversation because we don't need to do that. But that meant a lot to me.
Heartfelt, my friend. It was,
It meant a lot
by the grace of God,
to all of us.
we haven't gone through that. And I pray for you and the people of Uvalde daily. And, you know, I will say this, that when we move these bills, the combination of all these different bills, of course, Uvalde having their behavioral health center funded in the budget is something that I am honored to be a part of, and it will never bring back those lives, but it is something that we can look forward in the windshield to say, we're here to help.
I tell you, I spent 15 days straight out there, and I've gotten to know all those families, and I got to see all the darn videos that I've told you about, and it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Your call did mean a lot. And I don't know that this amendment, we did give this to you a few days ago, and I know you've seen it. We've compressed it into one page rather than 2 different amendments. I don't know that it would do much, and by the way, thank you for your bill because it's necessary in rural Texas in a big way. But I think you know by now how I feel about gun violence, and I probably, as a guy that owns about 9 guns, I never really looked at this issue as much as I have in the last year. But it's a big deal. And Texas is one of the top 3 states for homicide-suicide incidents. Number 1 cause of death of children, as you know now, is gun violence. And all this amendment seeks to do is just when these entities are awarded grants under your program is just another poster on the door or on the wall and on their websites. It's about suicide prevention and safe firearm storage. In this process, I got to meet some of Senator Middleton's constituents from Santa Fe, and they've got to be my friends, and they tell me the story about how that young man was able to grab his dad's shotgun and another rifle and go kill all those kids over there. It just was so easy for that kid to do that. On March 3rd of this year, a little 3-year-old in Houston, 3-year-old girl, killed her 4-year-old sister. I don't know that a posting on an internet site's going to do anything. Parents need to people need to watch. They need to do something about these guns they're leaving around. There's a judge in Bexar County, I don't want to get into her name. She lost her little boy, who was 12 years old, who was at his dad's house. The gun was just laid out, and the boy's gone. And so I don't know that these things, these postings on these websites or a poster on a wall where someone goes into a hospital unit or anything is going to do anything. But it's a minor intrusion. And so I'd like for you to consider that. And members, just so you know, that's all we're asking for is so that we, entities that get these grants, that they conspicuously display in a visible public area on their website and their premises information on suicide prevention and safe firearm storage. This deal is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. going to be the thing I'm going to talk about as long as I'm in public service for the rest of my life. That's it. Let's move adoption.
Yep.
Senator Colkhorst on the amendment.
Senator, I'm going to respectfully ask to not put it in the bill because of the grants that we're looking to do with nonprofits, but I'm going to give you my word on something. I'm going to go, I don't know if the Department of State Health Services or if Health and Human Services is the right place to do it, of how they can link back to some of these nonprofits and our hospitals and other people that are going to do these services. But I do think that the awareness of safe firearm storage. As you and I've discussed, I'm a huge hunter. Just walk into my office, and we take for granted that parents know that they should lock them up and have these things, and they don't. And there's some great advocacy groups out here that I think that we can do more awareness with and link it to that, as well as, and you have been really great about the suicide prevention. I remember when you came to the Ag Committee with your bill. It was really tremendous. I had no idea about farmers and their suicide rate. And so I will give you my word that I'm going to meet with the Department of State Health Services and HHSC to see the best place that we can do this on their websites, and potentially then have it linked as a link, because when the budget comes forward in this next week, I can assure you there's a lot of IT money in there, but IT does cost something. So for these small nonprofits to be able to link back to those sites. And so I give you my word. Thank you for your advocacy and for your tireless efforts in an area, as you say, that will affect you for the rest of your life.
Members, the motion is on the adoption of the amendment. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colkhorst, Lamantia, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry, Wertner, Sparks, West, Whitmire, Zaffarini.
There being 12 ayes and 18 nays, the amendment fails. Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage of committee substitute to Senate Bill 26 to engrossment.
Members, Senator Kolkhorst moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Members, Senator Kolkhorst moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will
But this is fine. I mean, because the truth is there's more beans on than ours. And so it works out.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There
Campbell,
being
Brady.
30 ayes and no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage committee substitute Senate Bill 26. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 26 relating to local mental health authority and local behavioral health authority audits and mental and behavioral health reporting services and programs.
Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I move final passage, I want to thank my staff and Maureen Matoyer and the Health and Human Services staff for the great job that they did on this bill, and I want to thank the members for all their input. I move final passage of committee substitute to Senate Bill 26.
Members, Senator Kolkhorst moves final passage. Committee substitute Senate Bill 26. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
30 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Kolkhorst. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute Senate Bill 902.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and members. This bill seeks to put in statute the existing Texas Leadership Student Program operated by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. The legislation sets forth specific qualifications for becoming a Texas Leadership Scholar, including being eligible for automatic admissions to general academic teaching institutions, being nominated by their school districts, and having achieved another academic distinction recognized by Higher Education Coordinating Board, and maintaining a minimum overall grade point average at an academic teaching institution as determined by the board rule. Move suspension of the regular order of business.
Members, Senator West moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 902. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 902. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 902 relating to the establishment of the Texas Leadership Scholars Program.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment.
Members, Senator West moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So move.
Members, Senator West moves suspension of the constitutional 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There
Campbell.
being 28 ayes and 2 nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage committee substitute Senate Bill 902. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 902 relating to the establishment of the Texas Leadership Scholars Program.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move final passage of committee substitute Senate Bill 902.
Members, Senator West moves final passage committee substitute Senate Bill 902. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
There being 28 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator West. Senator Hughes, for what purpose? Your light is on, but...
Lights are on, nobody's home, Mr. President. Sorry about that. Someone else must have.
All right.
My mistake, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Senator Hughes. Senator Huffman. You're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2289.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. At this time, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the Senate Bill 2289. Members, despite not having a corporate or individual income tax, Texas has a high effective tax rate for medical manufacturers. Because of this, Texas's tax on medical and biomedical manufacturing inventories significantly discourages capital investment and expansion. In fact, most of the medical and biomedical manufacturing is located abroad, and the cost to ship medical supplies to the United States increased more than 50% in 2021, causing increased costs to Texans for vital supplies. The majority of medical and biomedical manufacturing is located in foreign countries. Furthermore, inflation and supply chain constraints has created a new urgency to regionalize supply and continuous manufacturing. This bill will be the enabling legislation for SJR 87. So with the approval of Texas voters, this bill would exempt from ad valorem taxation tangible personal property that is used or produced by medical and biomedical manufacturers such as medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and PPE. Medical and biomedical manufacturers would continue to pay all other applicable taxes, including real property tax, margins, unemployment taxes, and sales taxes. Furthermore, local tax administrators would still retain control over the enforcement of the use of this exemption. Since 2020, Texas has missed opportunities for billions in private investment opportunities for biomedical manufacturing. Securing pharmaceutical, medical device, and PPE manufacturing will meaningfully impact Texas by promoting innovation and advancement in medical technologies, strengthening Texas's medical supply chain, and investing in job creation. I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To ask questions of the author.
Do you yield, Senator Huffman?
Yes.
You recognize Senator Eckhart.
Senator Huffman, I am completely in favor of this bill as well as its companion SJR. This is an important effort to seed biomedical and pharmaceutical manufacturing in the state, and I applaud you for that. My only question is with regard to the evergreen nature of the preferential tax treatment. Under the enabling legislation, this exemption would be continuous, correct?
There is no sunset in the bill, correct?
Do you anticipate any mechanism outside of this bill? What would be the mechanism if sometime in the future our pharmaceutical and biomedical manufacturing industry is very strong and is no longer in need of the preferential tax treatment?
You know, I can't predict what future legislators would do or might do. There's always an opportunity for legislators to pass legislation or constitutional amendments to back out of this. I can't predict what would happen. I can say that in this industry, the initial capital investment to bring manufacturers to the state is significant. Texas is the only I'd say the only large manufacturing state that imposes this type of tax, and it has seriously dampened any enthusiasm for manufacturers in this industry to come to Texas. So it is believed, and there's evidence that it will support new job creation in Texas. Real estate will bring in other types of taxes. I think it will be a very good economic opportunity for Texans, brings great high-paying jobs, and more importantly, in my book, it brings both national security because it, supplies the very needs of Texans in the medical arena. During COVID, I've been told that there were serious shortages, as we all know, in PPE, in certain pharmaceuticals that were needed to support COVID patients. Medical equipment that was needed to support ill patients. And it was really a crisis. We were in a critical time in our state. And so moving forward, we don't want to ever be in that situation again. I think many Texans would like the idea that their pharmaceuticals were manufactured and developed. I mean, we develop a lot of the vaccines and the pharmaceuticals right at the Texas Medical Center up at, in Dallas or wherever in Texas. We have great researchers and scientists here in Texas that we've invested great state dollars into developing this, but we're not manufacturing it because we don't provide that extra incentive. So if we want to attract this type of industry, I think having a sunset would dampen their enthusiasm to come to Texas. So we've thought this out carefully. I mean, we don't grant these exemptions lightly. Perhaps there's some out there now that shouldn't be there, but I think this is one. And again, the voters are going to have to decide if, in fact, it is one that they approve of. But I think that it is one that has long-term valuable implications for all Texans, and that's why I support it and have brought forth this legislation.
Thank you so much for answering my question. There is decades of research showing that preferential tax treatment in endeavors like this that have a very high upfront cost but also a huge public benefit are exceedingly appropriate for preferential tax treatment. My only concern with it is preferential tax treatment should be reviewed from time to time so that it doesn't turn into an entitlement and it truly does seed market behavior that wouldn't occur without it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Members, the motion is on suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2289. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 20. You got an amendment? Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute, Senate Bill 2289. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2289, relating to the exemption from ad valorem taxation of certain tangible personal property held by a manufacturer of medical or biomedical products as a finished good.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Huffman.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you. Members, this is just a cleanup of the ballot language. That the enabling legislation has the ballot language as well. And when I present the SJR, I'll have the same amendment. But basically, the amendment was cleaned up to make it clear to voters what they were actually voting on, which is very important. So that's what it does.
Members, are there any objection on the amendment? Hearing and seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion.
I move passage to engrossment of Senate Bill 2289.
Members, Senator Huffman moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Members, Senator Huffman moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
There being
Blanco.
28 ayes and 2 nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2289. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2289, relating to the exemption from ad valorem taxation of certain tangible personal property held by a manufacturer of medical or biomedical products as a finished good.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage of Senate Bill 2289.
Members, Senator Huffman moves final passage Senate Bill 2289. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
There being 28 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Huffman.
Thank you, members.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business. Take up and consider SJR 87.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider SJR 87. Members, this is the constitutional amendment that goes along with the Senate bill that I just passed out. It would provide for an election where voters would determine whether or not they wanted to grant this exemption to this type of manufacturers, and I'm going to have a floor amendment that changes the ballot language. With that, I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Members, Senator Huffman moves suspension of the regular order of business on SJR 87. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading SJR 87. Secretary will read the caption.
SJR 87, proposing a constitutional amendment to authorize the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation certain tangible personal property held by a manufacturer of medical or biomedical products.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Huffman.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, members. This is the amendment that simply cleans up the ballot language to make it clear to Texan voters what they will be voting for.
Members, is there objection to adoption of the amendment? Hearing and seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion.
I move passage to engrossment of SJR 87.
Members, Senator Huffman moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Members, Senator Huffman moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
28 ayes and 2 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage SJR 87. Secretary will read the caption.
SJR 87, proposing a constitutional amendment to authorize the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation certain tangible personal property held by a manufacturer of medical or biomedical products.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage of SJR 87.
Members, Senator Huffman moves final passage SJR 87. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
There being
Blanco.
28 ayes and 2 nays, the SJR is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Alvarado, are you ready on SB 1364? Senator Alvarado, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business. Take up and consider Senate Bill 1364.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1364 provides a 2,000-pound weight exemption for vehicles fueled primarily by electric battery power. It increases the gross vehicle weight limit to 82,000 pounds for these vehicles. Current Texas regulations for vehicle weight do not account for the extra weight of the batteries in electric semi-trucks. As a result, electric trucks have to limit their cargo to comply with the current 80,000-pound weight limit in Texas. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 1364.
Members, Senator Alvarado moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1364. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell,
There
Creighton.
being 25 ayes and 5 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1364. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1364, relating to weight limitations for certain natural gas or electric vehicles.
Senator Alvarado, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Members, Senator Alvarado moves passage to engrossment. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
25 ayes and 5 nays, the bill is passed to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Senator Alvarado, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Members, Senator Alvarado moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell,
There being 25 ayes and 5 nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1364. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1364, relating to weight limitations for certain natural gas or electric vehicles.
Senator Alvarado, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you. I move final passage of Senate Bill 1364.
Member Senator Alvarado moves final passage of SB 1364. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
There being 24 ayes and 6 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Hinojosa, you are recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 1429.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Senate Bill 1429 relates to the use of standardized examinations by a school of nursing or educational program. In 2017, the Texas Board of Nursing issued the board education guidelines in response to numerous reports and questions from students, parents, and policymakers about the use of vendor-created standardized examinations, especially when these exams are used to deny students the opportunity to take the licensing exam. At that time, a survey revealed many nursing programs were using these exams as a graduation requirement or used to deny students graduation, which is required for a licensing exam. With feedback from the vendors, Board of Education guidelines outlines the effective use of vendor-created standardized exams as an evaluation of student progress and cautions nursing programs from using these exams in a high-stakes manner. These guidelines recommended that this exam should not be used to prevent students from progressing or graduating. In 2023, a second survey revealed that despite the board's guidelines and cautions, many nursing programs disregarded the board's recommendation and continued to use vendor-created standardized exams to deny graduation and not allowing nursing students to take the licensing exam. Senate Bill 1429 would authorize the board to adopt rules to prohibit the use of vendor-created standardized examinations as a graduation requirement to deny students graduation. With that, Mr. President and members, I move that we suspend the regular order of business.
Members, Senator Hinojosa moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1429. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1429. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1429 relating the use of standardized examination by a school of nursing or educational program.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion.
I move passage to engrossment.
Members, Senator Hinojosa moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Hinojosa moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1429. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1429 relating the use of standardized examinations by a school of nursing or educational program.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage of Senate Bill 1429.
Senator Hinojosa moves final passage SB 1429. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Flores, would you come to the dais?
Y'all may not see me with this backdrop, but I'm here. Senator Blanco is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1133.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 1133. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Governor, my colleagues, Senator Birdwell, Colcourse, Flores, Hinojosa, Perry, and Zaffarini for collaborating with me on this important bipartisan bill. According to the Senate Committee on Border Security's interim report, ranchers and farmers have reported significant financial losses and property damage from increased trafficking, smuggling, and bailout activity along the Texas border and in our rural communities. As of March 16th of 2023, there have been a whopping 3,434 border bailouts recorded by state law enforcement operations on the border. This is a dire issue that's negatively impacting Texas ranchers and Texas farmers, and currently they have no financial recourse besides dipping into their personal savings, and if their insurance covers it, dealing with their insurance companies. So this bill is going to establish a program under the Office of the Attorney General to compensate landowners who suffer property damage from certain border-related offenses on agricultural land. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Blanco moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute 1133. Is there no objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1133. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1133 relating to a grant program to compensate landowners for property damage caused by certain criminal activities.
Following amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the following amendment is an amendment to this bill that will strike the word grant from the bill entirely and replace it with the word claim, which is a better description of the program. It also grants the Office of the Attorney General the authority to establish rules and delegate authority to ensure smooth processing of each claim. And finally, it adds an appeal process for landowners who want to challenge the outcome of their application for compensation. So the members, this is a perfecting amendment. I move adoption to floor amendment number 1.
Are there objections? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Blanco.
Senator Blanco, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment will limit compensation of damages to only border crimes resulting in damage of real property, which have been supported by law enforcement and in a law enforcement report. Adding this provision will ensure that the funds are being used to compensate landowners for intended offenses and add accountability to the application process. Members, this is another clarifying amendment. I move adoption.
Senator Birdwell, what purpose?
I'm the author on the amendment, Mr. President.
Do you yield?
I yield.
Thank you, Senator Blanco. Very important bill. Happy to have signed on to it with you. On this amendment, when you talk about it only applies to real property, would that include cattle and livestock? Because one of the things that we've seen down there is not just damage to property and buildings, other things, but we've seen loss of cattle with the damage to fences and cattle get out, or in some cases, cattle eating much of the trash, other things. And my understanding is that by adopting this amendment, we would potentially be removing livestock from being recoverable as property damage. So I wanted to get your clarification.
That's correct, Senator. The property means, specifically real property means land, an improvement, mine or a mineral or quarry, standing timber, an estate of interest. So it does exclude cattle. It does exclude any kind of game that's on the property.
Does it include the fences? Because some of the property owners that we met down there, whether it's their own domestic livestock or it's exotic hunt livestock with 8-10-foot fences, the fences that are damaged would be included in that.
Absolutely. Fences, any kind of structures around any kind of infrastructure in that area is covered under this bill.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Members, move adoption.
Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Well, Senator Blanco, yield.
I yield.
You yield?
You know, Senator Blanco, just to follow up on Senator Birdwell's, because I know we have worked on this bill for quite some time, and one of the number one complaints from many of our ranchers and farmers have been damage to the property from immigrants and bailouts and smugglers. And the issue really on real property versus personal property, I'm just a bit concerned about also many times when the fence is broken down, you have cattle escape, you have horses escape, and sometimes they are lost because they get either run over or just get damaged and are no longer able to perform what the reason that they would have them in some of the ranches. So in your bill, I guess there's no exception for that type of damage.
I'm sorry, what was the last question?
I guess in this bill, Committee Substitute Senate Bill 1133, there's no exception for that. As it's got to be real property, and that's it.
It's got to be real property, and that's specifically defined in the bill.
Well, I support the bill. I think real property is the real problem. But at some point, I would hope, and we'll maybe get a better feel after this bill, if it becomes law and implemented, whether or not we need to expand that definition to include other cattle or other property that may not be real property, but may be, I don't know how you would define it, but certainly I wouldn't say personal property. It is real property that many of the farmers and ranchers use for a living out in their farms and ranches.
Happy to work with you on that. Thank you, Senator.
President.
The question is on the adoption. Is there objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
For amendment number 3 by Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment will clarify existing language in the bill in which the state is the payer of last resort for the landowner's damages. This is going to ensure that the compensation gets to the landowners who need it the most and help the program's funds last for a greater amount of time. Move adoption.
Is there objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 4 by Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment will change the maximum amount of compensation awarded per application from $100,000 to $75,000. This, like the previous amendment, will also ensure longevity of funds for this program so that many landowners as possible can have the opportunity to be made whole again from damages to their property. Move adoption.
Is there objection? The amendment is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 5 by Colcourse.
Chair recognizes Senator Colcourse on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I want to thank Senator Blanco for his efforts in this. I remember an interim committee where you came to Senate Finance and we were discussing border issues, and You were so articulate about the issues. It happens in Senate District 18. You are a border senator. I am not. And so, members, I have to tell you that this bill is not just for border counties. This is for everyone in the state of Texas. And so I want to thank you for your important work on this, and you're I think really headed in the right direction because it's the right thing to do. So, members, I want to say this amendment provides fiscal responsibility for this new border crime fund. My staff worked with the Lieutenant Governor's office along with Senator Blanco's staff to ensure long-term fiscal prudence. The amendment expires the fund and chapter if the legislature does not appropriate funds, and the funds could be exhausted. This amendment will ensure that Texans are not dependent on the fund that has no money in it. This is just belts and suspenders to make sure. It's almost in a way, Senator Blanco, I look at this as almost like a pilot program. I don't think that people realize. I was in Lavaca County. You know how far Lavaca is from the border? A long, long way. And a gentleman came up to me at a Farm Bureau annual meeting. I'd spoken there, and he was very nice. And he said, you know, there was a chase with some people from the border, and they went through 3 of my cross fences. And he said, I don't want to complain too much, but, you know, is it my responsibility to have to pay for those? He said, you know, it ended up being a little over $3,000. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so wrong. And that was before you came to Senate Finance and talked about it. And so I'm happy to work with you. And again, you know, it's almost in a way, you know, a start to something that I think is real until we get the border more secure. So thank you for your work.
Senator, thank you so much. I remember that hearing, and we were sitting next to each other, and we were hearing some of the testimony and folks. And as I travel throughout the district, as you do as well, as you know, I represent El Paso, but I represent a lot of very rural counties as well. And it's a big issue. It's not their fault. They're just trying to make a living, provide food on Americans' tables. And we need to provide them the support. But you were the first one. You and Senator Birdwell have been very instrumental in helping me out on this bill. But you had committed early on to say, hey, we need to find the funds for this. So really appreciate your leadership and your support for this important bill.
Thank you. Thank you for your work, Senator Blanco. You work here in the Senate, and I'm honored to work with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Blanco, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to passage of engrossment.
Senator Blanco moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Blanco is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Senator Blanco moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
30 ayes and 0 nays. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1133. The secretary read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1133 relating to a grant program to compensate landowners for property damage caused by certain criminal activities.
Senator Blanco is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Senator Blanco moves final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1133. The secretary call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
30 ayes and 0 nays. Congratulations, Senator Blanco.
Members, thank you very much, members. Thank you, Mr. President.
The chair recognizes Senator Menendez for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, it is my distinct honor to rise and introduce people who help people every single day. You know, I think something that we sometimes take for granted is the fact that we know where our next meal is going to come from. But folks, let me tell you, every week, 105,000 individuals are served. The Food Bank of San Antonio distributes about 74 million meals annually. Food insecurity is a very real issue, And I want to welcome my friend Mario Bledo and his counterpart from the Central Texas Food Bank. They do so many things. They have a farmer's market that provides a wide variety of fresh fruits and vegetables to our community. They run a mobile mercado, a mobile food truck that travels to food deserts around San Antonio and Bexar County and help educate residents about healthy cooking options. And they provide benefits assistance to help individuals apply for the benefits ranging from SNAP, Medicaid, CHIP, WIC, and TANF. So it is a true honor to recognize you all here on the floor of the Senate, but more importantly, to thank you for helping so many young families, so many kids who the worst thing I can think of is a child being hungry. So thank you for what you do. And Mr. President, members, thank you, and help me welcome the Food Bank of Central Texas and San Antonio.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 786.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 786. Members, there is a current conflict in Texas law regarding the wells associated with geothermal energy. The Texas Railroad Commission and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality are both required to regulate these wells. Wells associated with geothermal energy include geothermal closed-loop injection wells, which are a Class 5 injection well under the jurisdiction of TCEQ. Fluids are encased in pipes and not exposed to the earth, then circulated using the earth as a heat source to generate the power. However, Railroad Commission is also given the responsibility to regulate the exploration, development, and production of geothermal energy and associated resources. If a geothermal generator is using a closed-loop injection well for power, the well is regulated by both the Railroad Commission and TCEQ per current statute. The agencies do have an MOU to cooperate with each other. However, uncertainty remains for operators when seeking the correct regulatory authority. To address the conflict, this bill would remove closed-loop geothermal injection wells from the regulatory authority of TCEQ and place them solely under the regulatory authority of the Railroad Commission, as well as transfer any related duties from these wells from TCEQ to the Railroad Commission. This clarification would provide certainty to potential operators seeking to produce geothermal energy, and open-loop injection wells not used for geothermal production in which water is not contained in the geothermal system would still be under the authority of TCEQ. And additionally, the remaining types of Class 5 injection wells are unaffected by this legislation. I move suspension, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 786. Is there objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 786. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 786, relating to the regulation by the Railroad Commission of Texas of closed-loop geothermal injection wells.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none. The bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
30 ayes, 0 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 786. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 786, relating to the regulation by the Railroad Commission of Texas of closed-loop geothermal injection wells.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion.
Move final passage, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves final passage of Senate Bill 786. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
30 ayes and 0 nays. Your bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Johnson is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 681.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senate Bill 681 resolves a discrepancy between two sections of code, the Occupations Code and the Health and Safety Code. Regarding long-term care providers, currently they are able to obtain an occupational license under the Occupations Code. However, if you've been convicted of certain crimes, even if they're unrelated to the duties and responsibilities of the licensed occupation, under the Health and Safety Code, you cannot work in a long-term care facility. Senate Bill 681 aligns the licensing requirements of the employability under one code with the requirements for employment and licensing under another code. This resolves an issue brought to us by the agencies themselves. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 681.
Senator Johnson moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 681. Is there objection? Hearing none. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 681. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 681, relating the applicability of certain laws regarding the occupational licensing of individuals with criminal convictions to the licensing of certain long-term health care facility personnel.
Senator Johnson is recognized for a motion.
I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Johnson moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none. The bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Johnson is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Senator Johnson moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The Secretary call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
30 ayes and 0 nays. The Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 681. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 681, relating the applicability of certain laws regarding the occupational licensing of individuals with criminal convictions to the licensing of certain long-term health care facility personnel.
Senator Johnson is recognized for a motion.
I move final passage on Senate Bill 681.
Senator Johnson moves final passage of Senate Bill 681. The Secretary call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
30 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Mr. President and members.
Senator Menendez is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on a committee substitute for Senate Bill 1577.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President and members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider at this time the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1577. Members, this bill is brought to us by the Texas Realtors Association because we needed to modernize the terms and the practices related to the structure and operation of the Texas Real Estate Research Center, which have not been updated since 1987. A lot of things have changed since then, and so the items within the bill are agreed upon by all the stakeholders, the Realtors, the Real Estate Commission, and the Texas Real Estate Center. Appreciate it, Mr. President. And that's my motion.
Senator Menendez moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1577. Is there objection? Hearing none. The rules are suspended. The Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1577. Secretary read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1577, relating to the Texas Real Estate Research Center, the Real Estate Research Advisory Committee, the Texas Real Estate Commission, and the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board.
Senator Menendez is recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Menendez moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none. The bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Menendez is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Senator Menendez moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall.
30 ayes. The rules are suspended. The Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of committee substitute Senate Bill 1577. Secretary read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1577, relating to the Texas Real Estate Research Center, the Real Estate Research Advisory Committee, the Texas Real Estate Commission, and the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board.
Senator Menendez is recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move final passage of committee substitute 1577.
Senator Menendez moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1577. Secretary call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
30 ayes and 0 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Lamantia, you are recognized on Senate Bill 956.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 956.
Senator Lamantia, would you care to explain the bill, please?
Yes, this bill was voted out of Health and Human Services Committee unanimously, and SB 956 repeals the Coordinated Strategic Plan for
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, I thought on first bills that the entire bill had to be read by the author. It's been moved and properly seconded.
Sounds like
Mr.
a very good idea, Senator West.
Think it's a very good idea, sir?
Yes, I do.
So I'd ask that the author read the entire bill.
Senator Lamontia, would you please read the whole bill?
A bill to be entitled an act relating to repealing the Coordinated Strategic Plan for Health and Human Services in this state, including related conforming amendments, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Texas. Section 1, Section 531.024A, Government Code, is amended to read as follows. The Executive Commissioner shall facilitate and enforce coordinated planning and delivery of health and human services, including A, co-location of services, B, integrated intake, and C, coordinated referral and care management. 2, develop with Department of Information Resources.
Senator Johnson, for what purpose?
Of order. This is boring.
I second that motion.
The point of order is well taken and sustained. Senator Menendez, for what purpose?
Mr. President, I have a few serious questions about this legislation for the author of the bill.
Senator Lamontia, do you yield?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. I'm glad we kept you from reading the whole bill because it appears to be a simple bill. So you, in your bill, as I read it, you strike the words compliance with the coordinated strategic plan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Why? Why are we taking out compliance? Do you don't think that the department here should have coordination or compliance with their strategic plan?
They have two strategic plans. The coordinated strategic plan merely takes those two and forms into one document, so it becomes inefficient and unnecessary.
According to who?
This was brought to us by Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services brought you something for them to do less work, and you filed the bill?
It's part of the plan that started back in 2013 to streamline the Health and Human Services Committee and combine the efforts and workforce into smaller department agencies.
So every time that I file a bill where I'm asking them to do something, they add FTEs and they put a fiscal note. Are they giving us FTEs back or money back for you taking work away?
No, sir.
No. So you're giving them less work. They get to keep the same amount of people and the same amount of money.
Yes.
Sounds fishy. Thank you for taking my questions. And congratulations on your first bill.
Thank you.
Senator Alvarado, for what purpose?
To ask the author a few questions.
Senator Lamontia, do you yield?
I do.
So, people from the Valley love to let everybody know that they're from the Valley. Is that why you filed Senate Bill 956?
Well, this was destiny. We went to go file it and we got this number and we were just very, very excited to have Senate Bill 956.
I've never been able to file a Bill 713. I'm sure Senator Eckhart's never gotten a bill number 512. I'm very suspicious, y'all. It's Senate Bill 956, which is the area code for the Valley. You know, I remember my first bill. I thank you for reading your entire bill, but I thought it was a beer to go bill.
No, not this one, no.
Okay. So do you drink IPAs?
I do.
You do? Stouts?
Correct.
Ciders?
Yes.
Okay. Well, do you drink products that you don't sell?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. I want to welcome you to the Senate. You've been such a great addition to this body. Congratulations on your first bill.
Thank you.
Senator Campbell, for what purpose?
To ask the author of a bill about her presentation of the bill.
Senator Lamontia, do you yield?
Yes.
Senator LaMantia, you know, do you respect this body?
Yes, ma'am.
It is this Thursday, and it's almost 1:45. Were you really going to put us through? How many pages is that bill? Seriously, how many pages is that bill?
It is 3 pages. 4 pages.
Oh, make sure you know how many pages your bill is.
4 pages.
Were you really going to have us this late in the game all listen to you really read this whole bill?
If it would help pass the bill and at the request of a colleague,
So
yes,
let me ask you this. So one colleague wants to keep us all here while you read a bill. Did it ever occur to you to ask the for a pause to ask the parliamentarian if you cannot have to do that? What if your bill was 50 pages long?
I will make a note of that for next time.
I just think if you're going to, we want to see that you respect this body, respect our time, that you would either ask a courtesy from Senator West or at least a pause and ask the parliamentarian if there's another way that you could possibly get out of doing that, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Senate.
Thank you.
Senator Springer, for what purpose?
To ask the author a few questions.
Senator Lamontia, do you yield?
Yes.
Well, you just answered Senator Campbell that you respect the body, but I mean, do you think you believe in being a good neighbor?
Yes.
And what hallway do you stay on?
700.
700 hallway. What other senators are on the 700 hallway?
You're in the 700 hallway, as is Senator Nichols and Senator Middleton.
And have you shared with the three of us any of the products that you distribute?
No, I have not.
You do not call that not very
Senator
neighborly?
Menendez, for what purpose?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President. Is it appropriate for one new member to ask another new member questions on hazing?
Senator Springer is slightly used and not used and not new.
Slightly, huh? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the motion to suspend the regular order of business? Hearing none, rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 956. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 956, relating to repealing the Coordinated Strategic Plan for Health and Human Services in this state.
Senator Lamontia is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage of SB 956 to engrossment.
Senator Lamontia moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? There is an objection. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado. Betancourt. Birdwell. Blanco. Campbell. Creighton. Eckhart. Flores. Gutierrez. Hall. Hancock. Nahosa. Huffman. Hughes. Johnson. Colcourse. Lamontia. Menendez. Middleton. Miles. Nichols. Parker. Paxton. Perry.
No, a double no.
Wertner.
Wow, look at all that red.
Wow. It's going down. Secretary, look here. Double two. Wait, let me give you a double two. Double two. Double two. No. Vote no, members.
Wertner. Sparks. Springer.
Hell no.
No, it's not.
Everyone does P&Z.
West. Whitmire. Zaffarini.
Not looking good. You find some friends.
I don't
Only
I was
Due to a complete lack of interest, the bill passes to engrossment. Senator Lamontia is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Senator Lamontia moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Everett.
Be 30 ayes. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 956. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 956 relating to repealing the Coordinated Strategic Plan for Health and Human Services in this state.
Senator Blanco, for what purpose?
Questions of the author?
Will the author yield?
Yes.
Senator Lamontia, we just passed to engrossment. What does that mean?
I believe it means it gets recorded in the journal.
Is that what you believe, or it didn't sound you didn't sound confident?
I'm not as confident in that answer, but that is the one I'm going to go with.
Your predecessor was,
Senator Lucio.
how long did he serve?
He started, I believe, in the House in 87.
And in the Senate?
In the Senate, 91.
So 30 years?
Yes.
You plan on being here 30 years too?
I look forward to what the future has in store.
Well, maybe in 30 years you'll figure out what engrossment is.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the Senate.
Senator Lamontia is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of SB 956.
Senator Lamontia moves final passage of Senate Bill 956. Secretary, call the roll.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Senator, could you hold on a minute because it looks like we have a machine malfunction. Please be patient, Senator Lamontia. We're working on it. Senator, it appears that your votes have left the room and the chamber. Do you want us to continue?
Parliamentary inquiry, are we able to?
It's a little bit problematic for you right now. I think maybe you need to go find your votes, Senator. We'll wait. We'll pause while you go find your votes, if that's okay with you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You can leave your desk, or we'll waive that rule for now.
Mr. President, I believe I found some friends.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
Be 30 ayes, 0 nays. Congratulations, the bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute 1911.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Committee substitute Senate Bill 1911 increases penalties for failure to deliver election supplies, obstruction and distribution of election supplies, and releasing election results before the polls close. It's a very self-explanatory bill based on Harris County's recent activity. I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute Senate Bill 1911.
Members, Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 1911. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
There being 18 ayes and 11 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 1911. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1911 relating to election supplies and the conduct of elections.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage of the committee substitute for Senate Bill 1911 to engrossment.
Member Senator Betancourt moves passage to engrossment. There is objection. Secretary will call. Hold on a second.
Roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lamantia, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry.
There being 18 ayes and 12 nays, the bill is passed to engrossment, and we will hold there.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 1562.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the regular order of business, consider Senate Bill 1562 at this time, relating to creating the criminal offense of child grooming. Many instances of human trafficking involving children who have an element of grooming or coercion, where a person deliberately establishes a connection with a child in an effort to subject them to sexual crimes. Federal law considers child grooming to be an offense when a person knowingly persuades, entices, or coerces a child to engage in prostitution or criminal sexual activity. While this federal protection is a valuable tool, there is currently no state law that allows law enforcement to arrest human trafficker before the trafficking has occurred, even when there is an evidence of enticement and coercion. Senate Bill 1562 creates the offense of child grooming when a person knowingly attempts or acts to persuade, entice, or coerce a child to engage in conduct that would be considered a sexual crime to make them a party to such crimes. It is my hope that the creation of this offense will help combat human trafficking by preventing further victimization of children. I want to thank Senator Huffman and all the work she's done in this area, working with our office to make sure we have this in alignment with some legislation that she's looking at. And with that, I move suspension.
Senator Menendez, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked the author of the bill a couple of questions.
Do you yield, Senator Hancock?
I do.
You recognize Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, let me say thank you, Senator Hancock, for bringing this important legislative measure forward. I had heard that there might be some amendments. Do you know if there are any amendments to this bill?
Well, they have been withdrawn. I think one of them was not germane. The other one has been pulled down.
Okay, so one of the amendments had to do something with expanding, I think, the bill to maybe apply to people maybe a little older than your bill specifies children under the age of 18, correct?
Trying to be consistent with the federal laws so that we maintain that.
Well, I can appreciate that. Because you filed this important legislation, and you and everything you've said, I agree with you in your bill layout. But should we also not try to do the same thing and make sure that this type of the spirit of this law that you're about to pass applies to everyone we work with in and around this building?
I don't think that this eliminates that from happening. This is open legislation that would apply to anybody rather than trying to silo into certain sectors. This applies to every individual that would be involved in this situation.
It's too bad we can't find a way to protect maybe young people who may be over the age of 18, but maybe aren't really as wise as they should be, and maybe they're found in a power dynamic situation. But maybe we can work on something like that together.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. Members, the motion before us is suspension of the regular order of business. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1562. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1562 relating to creating the criminal offense of child grooming.
Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion.
I move to passage to engrossment.
Member Senator Hancock moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Member Senator Hancock moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Gardner.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1562. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1562 relating to creating the criminal offense of child grooming.
Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage.
Member Senator Hancock moves final passage of Senate Bill 1562. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Gardner.
30 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Hancock. Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business. Take up and consider Senate Bill 1745.
Member Senate Bill 1745 clears up the discrepancy in groundwater production fees amongst landowners in Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District. It brings parity within the districts of existing fee structures and is agreed upon amongst all stakeholders. With that, I move suspend the regular order of business.
Member Senator Perry moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1745. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1745. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1745, relating the equalization of the rates of production fees charged on certain wells by the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District.
Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage and engrossment.
Member Senator Perry moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Move to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Member Senator Perry moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
29 ayes and 1 nay, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1745. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1745, relating the equalization of the rates of production fees charged on certain wells by the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District.
Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion.
Move final passage.
Member Senator Perry moves final passage Senate Bill 1745. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
29 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Perry. Senator Paxton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business. Take up and consider committee substitute Senate Bill 422.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to Senate Bill 422. In 2019, the Texas legislature passed Senate Bill 1200, which created a new section in the Occupations Code to recognize out-of-state occupational licenses for the spouses of military service members. It allowed for portability of an occupational license for the spouse, so the spouse would not have to duplicate curriculum or testing from one state to another when the service member changed duty stations. Many service members also have state-issued occupational licenses, especially in the military reserves. However, this occupational licensing reciprocity for military spouses does not extend right now to cover the military service members themselves. Senate Bill 422 extends occupational licensing reciprocity to also include the military service members who are often stationed in states outside of where they originally obtained their license. I move to suspend.
Members, Senator Paxton moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 422. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 422. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 422, relating to the authority of certain military service members to engage in a business or occupation in this state.
Senator Paxton, you're recognized for a motion.
I move passage to engrossment.
Member Senator Paxton moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Paxton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Member Senator Paxton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
Being 30 ayes, no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage committee substitute Senate Bill 422. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 422, relating to the authority of certain military service members to engage in a business or occupation in this state.
Senator Paxton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. In honor of all of our service members, I move final passage of the committee substitute to Senate Bill 422.
Member, Senator Paxton moves final passages of committee substitute Senate Bill 422. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
There being 30 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute Senate Bill 1933.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. In the 2021 legislature, the legislature set up a random audit for small counties and large counties, 2 of each for every 2 election cycle. And the bill that we're talking about today basically expands that if the small county audits are done, Secretary of State can randomly select 2 more audits. This is because we're doing 2 out of 234 audits. It would take about 117 years to get through the program otherwise. The committee substitute expands this to allow for an oversight period to occur and as well as a conservator if necessary as a result of audits. And with that, I move suspension of the regular order of business and take up and consider the committee substitute Senate Bill 1933.
Yeah. Members, Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 1933. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
There being 19 ayes and 11 ayes, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 1933. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1933 relating to certain oversight procedures of the state over county elections.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passing engrossment of the committee substitute Senate Bill 1933.
Member Senator Betancourt moves passage to engrossment. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
There being 19 ayes and 11 nays, the bill is passed to engrossment. Will hold there, Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute Senate Bill 1213.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time the committee substitute for Senate Bill 1213 relating to establishing the Mold Assessment and Remediation Advisory Board at the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Members, generally, this bill would establish the Mold Assessor and Remediator Advisory Board for the Texas Commission and specify its composition, appointment, and confirmation process and advisory role. There will be a floor amendment. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Members, Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 1213. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute Senate Bill 1213. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1213 relating to the establishment of the Mold Assessment and Remediation Advisory Board under the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Zaffarini.
Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment simply would add an insurance representative to the board and to keep an odd number of members add a second home construction building contractor who is a member of a statewide building trade association. Mr. President, I move adoption.
Members, the motion is on adoption of the amendment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Member Senator Zaffarini moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Member Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
27 ayes and 3 nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage committee substitute Senate Bill 1213. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1213 relating to the establishment of the Mold Assessment and Remediation Advisory Board under the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation.
Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Member Senator Zaffarini moves final passage of committee substitute Senate Bill 1213. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
There being 27 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Zaffarini.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Members, we are getting ready to adjourn today's business day and move to the next business day. Chair recognizes Senator Zafrani for a highly privileged motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn until 2:13 p.m. today.
Members, is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the Senate stands adjourned until 2:13 Thursday, April 13th.